Outside cinemas, audiences are emerging into the daylight in tears. They are visibly shaken, lingering by the exits, trying to process what they just watched. The catalyst for this reaction is a newly released film called Ramabai. It is a passion project brought to life by regional actors from the city of Bhilai, entirely outside the usual machinery of mainstream cinema. Listening to the audience leaving the theater, you hear something very different from standard movie reviews. Viewers describe a heavy sense of historical guilt, a deep, unpaid debt they never knew they owed. This visceral reaction exposes a severe blind spot in our collective memory. We have only ever known half the story of how our historical icons are actually forged. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is universally recognized as a titan of modern history. He is the principal architect of the Indian Constitution, foundational to our democracy. But the way we record history contains a recurring flaw. We study the polished product, the leader on a pedestal, while ignoring the grueling manufacturing process. That erased manufacturing process has a name: Mata Ramabai, or Ramai. For decades, her life has served as the invisible, unacknowledged bedrock of Ambedkar's ascent. The literal destruction of her own life provided the material that allowed her husband to become Baba Saheb. To look at his academic and political achievements in isolation is to misread history entirely. His genius was not a standalone phenomenon. It was the direct product of immense shared domestic trauma. In the early 20th century, Ambedkar was thousands of miles away. He was pursuing a highly prestigious and incredibly expensive education at institutions like Columbia University and the London School of Economics. Back in India, the economic reality funding that education was brutally stark. Ramabai survived in destitution, forced to manually gather cow dung to make seal cakes and scavenge for scrap firewood to sell on the streets. The mechanics of their arrangement were unforgiving. Every single penny she wrung from exhausting menial labor in the dirt was sent overseas to fuel a world-class academic pursuit. In place of a typical wealthy benefactor, his studies were funded by a starving spouse living in the slums. Left behind in systemic poverty, Ramabai endured total social isolation. The physical toll of constant heavy labor on minimal food caused her health to rapidly deteriorate. Those overseas degrees were literally purchased with her physical health and daily humiliation. The inescapable grip of extreme poverty eventually demanded an unimaginable toll. Ramabai and Ambedkar lost 4 children to illnesses they simply could not afford to treat. When one of her children passed away, Ramabai tore the pallu of her sari to use as a burial shroud because she had no money for basic cloth. Thousands of miles away in London, the news of these deaths completely shattered Ambedkar. Plunged into deep despair, he packed his bags, ready to abandon his studies forever. It was in this exact moment that a foreign friend named Fanny intervened. She found Ambedkar on the verge of boarding a ship back to India. Fanny sat with him and argued that quitting now would render all of Ramabai's suffering, the starvation, the labor, the death of their children, completely meaningless. This unique web of female support secured the future of the Indian Constitution. One woman endured physical pain to provide the funds, while another provided the psychological grounding abroad to ensure the mission was finished. Capturing this raw history on film required a unique casting dynamic. The director utilized Dr. Uday Dabde and Prerna Dabde, a real-life married couple, to capture the intimate chemistry of the historical figures. For Prerna Dabde, the transformation was jarring. Transitioning from her background as a Mrs. Universe participant, she had to embody a destitute woman living in the 1920s. The actors had to unlearn modern comforts. They spent weeks mastering the body language of exhaustion, living in traditional attire, and physically acting out the heavy, repetitive labor that defined Ramabai's life. The film achieves its power through the actors' total immersion in the physical reality of exhaustion and deep historical trauma. Outside the theater, viewers are using the film to harshly critique their own modern relationship dynamics. Leaving the theater, audiences discuss the fragility of modern commitments. They look at current breakup culture through the lens of a woman who stayed through starvation and the loss of her children. One viewer noted that when freedom is received as a gift rather than earned through struggle, its value is often forgotten. The film forces a confrontation with the fact that today's rights came with a brutal entry fee paid by someone else. The film acts as a painful mirror. Watching Ramabai wrap her dead child in her own clothing makes modern complaints about struggle and sacrifice feel remarkably inadequate. By putting past trauma on full display, the story indicts the entitlement of the present day. It forces society to look closely and redefine what actual existential struggle looks like. The rights and privileges of modern democratic society were not born in a vacuum. They were incubated in the fires of grueling domestic sacrifice. Looking at the faces of that era, we must reevaluate our definitions of leadership. Ramabai was an active, equal co-founder of the modern Indian ethos. Behind the mythology of every historical giant, there is almost always an invisible, consuming flame of sacrifice that forged them. History may have failed to record Ramabai's tears at the time, but a century later, the resurrection of her story is finally forcing a nation to acknowledge its ultimate debt.